What is constructors in Java? Constructor in Java is a special method which gets called by the compiler when a new instance of the class is created. So when we create a new instance of the class using the new keyword, that is when the constructor is called. Constructor do not have any return type. It does not even return void. Constructor can take parameter or constructor can be parameterless. It depends upon the situation and the design how we want to define the constructor. Constructor is used mainly to initialize local members of a class. Now in some cases you might see that constructor does more than that, but it is usually not a good practice to do some operations inside of the constructor. It should be as simple as initializing members of the class or initializing some other class that will be used in that class. Constructor has the same name as the class. And finally, constructor is called only once by the compiler, meaning once an object of a class is created, after that constructor can never be invoked. So now let's look into an example. So here we have a class called user. To define a constructor for this class, we can create public user, and that's about it. This is a constructor and this is called a default constructor because it does not have any parameters. And to show that this constructor is going to be called when an instance of this class is created, I'm going to put a system.out.println statement here, which is going to be printed out when we create the new instance of this class. Now, if I go here and I just create var user is equal to new user and compile and run this application, we can see that in the output, it is going to print out the print statement inside of the constructor. And you can see here inside the constructor is getting printed out. And this is happening exactly at this statement. When we do new of user, that is when the constructor is getting called. Now let's change the constructor to have parameters. And for that, let's declare private variables here. So we can say private int age and private string name. And here in the constructor, we can take int age and string name. And inside of the constructor here, what we can do is we can say this dot age, and this is a variable which is available throughout the class. It points to the current instance of the class. So when we say this dot age, all we mean is this age here. So we can say this dot age is equal to age, and this dot name is equal to name. And here we can say name is equal to name, printing out name equal to name, age equal to age. And now here you can see we see a red squiggly. It says that the constructor user is undefined because we do not have any default constructor now, and the constructor that we have takes 2 parameters. So here if we pass 20 comma, now we can see that the error is gone. And now if we compile and run, we should be able to see the message that name is equal to John and age is 20 as expected. Now the next thing we can do with constructor is something called constructor overloading. So overloading is a concept of object-oriented programming. The meaning of overloading means you can have same method defined multiple times as long as the number of parameters that the method take are different types or different in numbers. And the overloading works also for constructor, not just for method. So for example, here for the user, if we want to have another constructor, we of course cannot have the same thing, but just hypothetically, if we change this to string instead of int, you can see it's going to work. Or if we just add yet another parameter here, string address, you can see now it is working again. And here what we can do is we can come and we can set string address. And here what we can do is here we can say this dot age is equal to age, this dot name is equal to name, finally this dot address is equal to address. Let me change it to semicolon. And similarly we can just do a system.out.println here, name, age. So this time let's use string interpolation. So here we can say string.format, and then what we can do is name is equal to, and we can say %s, and then age is equal to, address is equal to, and then here we can give name, age, address. Let's finish this. And now let's go ahead and change here also, pass the address. And now let's compile and run. And we can see name is John, age is 20, and address is 123 Street as expected. So this is how we can also use the overloaded constructor to create two different type of constructor. Now we can also have a default constructor. So we can also have public, user, and that's about it. So this gives us an option where we can go ahead and just do here user without any parameter, and this should work now because we created a default constructor. Now one thing to keep in mind, if we have default constructor, by default the value of this is going to be set to their default value, which means for age it will be 0, and for name and address it is going to be null. So if we print the same thing out here in this constructor, and now if we compile and run, we're going to see null values for name and address, and age is 0. And as you can see, as expected, we see that. So this is in a nutshell what constructor is, and usually is very useful during construction of a class for initializing it properly. And it becomes very critical when we get into some of the advanced concepts of Java, like dependency injection. That is all I wanted to cover for today's video. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you are new to this channel and you think you are getting value out of this channel, please subscribe to this channel. And thanks so much for watching this video.